When divers discovered a perfectly intact Japanese Zero fighter Funfunzekzich years after World War II, they found something impossible inside the sealed cockpit. The pilot's journal proving he never completed his Kamikaze mission. Dr. Kenji Yamamoto's hands trembled as he read the name on the identification papers, because the grandfather his family had mourned as a war hero for 6 decades, had been carrying a secret that both Japan and America would kill to keep buried. The diving equipment felt heavy on Dr. Kenji Yamamoto's back as he descended into the turquoise waters off Okinawa's coast. At 42 years old, he had explored dozens of underwater sites, but something about this one felt different. The sonar readings from last week had shown an unusual metal signature, far from any recorded naval battle zones. 20 meters down, Kenji's flashlight beam caught the distinctive shape. A Zero fighter, resting on the sandy bottom like a sleeping bird. His heart raced. The aircraft was remarkably intact, no signs of explosion or fire damage. Most NZ wrecks from World War II showed catastrophic damage, but this one looked like it had simply glided into the water and settled gently on the ocean floor. Kenji circled the wreck slowly, his camera documenting every detail. The canopy was still closed. Through the clouded glass, he could see the pilot's seat, and something that made his blood run cold. There were still objects inside, personal effects. He surfaced and called his research team. By afternoon, they had carefully opened the canopy using specialized tools. Inside, protected by the sealed cockpit and the preserving saltwater, they found a leather flight jacket, a small wooden box, and most surprisingly, a journal wrapped in oiled cloth. Back at the Maritime Archaeological Institute, Kenji laid out the items on examination tables. His assistant, Yuki Tanaka, carefully photographed each piece. The wooden box contained family photographs, yellowed but recognizable. A young woman holding a baby. An older couple standing before a traditional house. A wedding portrait. The flight jacket's inner pocket held identification papers, still legible. Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto, Imperial Japanese Navy. Born 1918, the information hit Kenji like a physical blow. Yamamoto was his family name. His grandfather had been Takeshi Yamamoto, a pilot who died in 2044. Yuki noticed his reaction. "Kenji, are you all right?" "This is my grandfather," he whispered. "But the records say he died in a kamikaze attack near Leyte Gulf. That's over 300 miles from here." He checked the aircraft's tail number against naval records. It matched. This was definitely his grandfather's plane. But everything about the discovery contradicted the official story his family had cherished for 65 years. The journal presented another mystery. Opening it carefully, Kenji found pages of text in his grandfather's handwriting, but written in some kind of code. Scattered among the coded entries were clear references to something called Operation Kiku, the chrysanthemum operation. He had never heard of it, and a quick search of naval databases returned nothing. "Yuki, get me everything we have on Imperial Navy operations from 1943 to 1945, Kenji said, his voice steady despite the questions flooding his mind. Especially anything classified or unusual. His grandfather hadn't crashed, he had landed. And somewhere in this coded journal lay the truth about why. The knock on the door came at dawn. Yuki Yamamoto, 6 months pregnant, knew immediately what it meant. In 1944 Tokyo, military officers arriving at sunrise brought only one kind of news. She knelt formally on the tatami mat as Commander Sato entered, flanked by 2 junior officers. Her hands rested on her swollen belly, steadying herself for what was coming. Takeshi's parents, elderly and frail, knelt beside her in silence. "Mrs. Yamamoto," Commander Sato began, his voice carrying practiced solemnity. "It is my honor to inform you that Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto died gloriously in service to the Emperor on October 25th. He piloted his aircraft into an American destroyer near Leyte Gulf, damaging the enemy vessel and fulfilling the highest duty of a Japanese warrior." Yuki's breath caught, but she maintained her composure. She had prepared herself for this moment since Takeshi joined the Special Attack Units 3 months ago. Every wife of a kamikaze pilot lived with this certainty hanging over them like a sword. Commander Sato presented a wooden box containing Takeshi's posthumous promotion papers, a medal for distinguished service, and a folded rising sun flag. "Your husband's sacrifice embodies the spirit of Yamato. He struck a meaningful blow against the enemy. The Emperor himself extends his gratitude to your family." Takeshi's mother began weeping quietly, her thin shoulders shaking. His father remained stone-faced, nodding acceptance of his son's fate. Yuki felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but she kept her head raised, dignified in her grief. "Did he suffer?" she asked quietly. "His death was instantaneous," Sato replied. He achieved his objective perfectly. 26 years old, 47 combat missions completed. Lieutenant Yamamoto was among our finest pilots. The American ship he struck was severely damaged. His action saved countless Japanese lives by stopping enemy advancement. After the officers left, Yuki sat alone in the room where she and Takeshi had shared their last night together. He had held her close, his hand on her belly feeling their child kick. He had whispered that he loved her, that their child would grow up in a better world because of what he was about to do. 3 months later, in January of 1945, Yuki gave birth to a son. She named him Hiroshi, as Takeshi had requested. The boy would never know his father, except through stories of heroism and sacrifice. For 65 years, the Yamamoto family built their identity around this narrative. Hiroshi grew up proud of his father's courage. He told his own son, Kenji, about the grandfather who had given everything for Japan. The medal sat in a place of honor in their home. The folded flag was preserved behind glass. None of them ever questioned the official story. Why would they? Takeshi Yamamoto had died a hero's death. His sacrifice meant something. But now, 65 years later, Kenji stood in a laboratory, staring at his grandfather's aircraft, perfectly intact, 300 miles from where it was supposed to have crashed. And nothing made sense anymore. Gleich Kenji stood in the institute's examination hangar, studying the Zero fighter under bright fluorescent lights. Professor Hiroshi Nakamura, Japan's leading naval historian, walked slowly around the aircraft, shaking his head in disbelief. "This makes no sense," Nakamura said, running his hand along the fuselage. "Look at the wings. No structural damage. The propeller blades are bent, yes, but only from water impact, not from collision with a ship." Kenji pointed to the undercarriage. The landing gear was partially extended. Why would a kamikaze pilot lower his landing gear before attacking? "He wouldn't," Nakamura replied flatly. "A suicide attack requires maximum speed. Landing gear creates drag. This pilot was trying to land on water, not crash into a target." They examined the engine next. The mechanics had carefully dismantled it, finding no explosion damage, no fire scoring, nothing consistent with the violent end described in official records. Instead, they found evidence of controlled shutdown, as if the pilot had deliberately cut the engine before touching water. Yuki Tanaka entered carrying the decoded journal pages. Her face was pale. "Kenji, you need to see this. We've translated about 30% of the entries. Your grandfather was using a substitution cipher, fairly simple once we identified the pattern." She spread the pages on a work table. Kenji read his grandfather's handwriting, now in clear Japanese. September 15, 1943. "Commander Tanaka approached me today about Operation Kiku. Says my skills are needed for something more important than dying. Don't know whether to feel honored or afraid." November 3, 1943. "Training continues at the Formosa facility. They're teaching us protocols I never learned at flight school. Navigation by stars alone, radio silence procedures, emergency water landings. This isn't preparation for a kamikaze attack." If stories like this move you, don't forget to leave a like, and share in the comments where you're watching from. March 7, 1944. Met the scientists today. 3 men who believe the war is already lost. They want their work preserved, not destroyed. Tanaka says we're saving the future, not betraying the present. I think about Yuki constantly. Our child will be born into whatever world remains. Nakamura leaned over Kenji's shoulder, reading intently. Operation Kiku? I've studied Imperial Navy operations for 40 years. That designation appears in no official records, no after-action reports, no archives. Could it have been classified? Yuki asked. Everything was eventually declassified after the war, Nakamura said. The Americans wanted complete documentation. If Operation Kiku existed, we would have records. Kenji checked the coordinates where they'd found the aircraft against wartime maps. Leyte Gulf is here, he pointed. We found the plane here. That's 300 miles southeast, completely different direction from any kamikaze attack route. So your grandfather wasn't where he was supposed to be, Nakamura said slowly. His aircraft shows a controlled landing, not a crash. His journal mentions a classified operation that doesn't officially exist. And he was carrying coded documents about scientists and preservation of research. Kenji felt his understanding of family history crumbling. My grandfather didn't die in a kamikaze attack, did he? No, Nakamura agreed quietly. I don't think he did. The question is, What was he really doing, and why did someone create a false record of his death? Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto stood at attention in the commandant's office at Tsuchiura Naval Air Base. At 26, he had survived 47 combat missions over China and the Pacific, more than most pilots could claim in 1943. He expected another assignment, perhaps training new recruits, or joining a fighter squadron. Instead, Commander Hideaki Tanaka sat behind the desk, a man Takeshi had never seen before. The insignia on his uniform indicated naval intelligence, not regular fleet operations. "Sit, Lieutenant," Tanaka said, gesturing to a chair. "What I'm about to discuss cannot leave this room. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." Tanaka opened a file containing Takeshi's complete service record. 47 missions, 16 confirmed kills, expert in night navigation, speaks some English from your university studies, you've never been shot down, never failed to return to base. "Remarkable. I've been fortunate, sir. Fortune has nothing to do with it. You're skilled, disciplined, and intelligent. That's why I'm here." Tanaka closed the file. "You're aware the military is forming special attack units. Kamikaze squadrons." Takeshi's stomach tightened. Every pilot knew about the suicide missions. "Yes, sir, your name appeared on a recruitment list. You'd be expected to volunteer within weeks." Tanaka paused, watching Takeshi's reaction. "But I'm offering you an alternative. Something that requires you to be alive, not dead." "I don't understand, sir." Tanaka leaned forward. "The war isn't going as the public believes. Our military leaders know we're losing, but they won't admit it publicly. Some of us in intelligence are trying to preserve what matters, save what can be saved for whatever comes after." "That sounds like defeatist talk, Commander." "It's realist talk, Lieutenant. We have scientists developing technology that could change warfare. Radar improvements, propulsion systems, communications equipment. If Japan falls, that knowledge will be destroyed or captured. We need it preserved, protected, available for reconstruction." Takeshi felt confused. "What does this have to do with me?" "We're running an operation called Kiku, the chrysanthemum. We identify scientists whose work must survive, then extract them to safe locations before American forces arrive. These operations must look like something else, something honorable that won't raise questions." Understanding dawned slowly. "You want me to fake a kamikaze attack? Your death would be recorded officially. Your family would receive honors, medals, everything appropriate for a fallen hero. But you'd actually be transporting scientists to designated extraction points. The Americans have agreed to protect certain individuals in exchange for their knowledge." "You're asking me to betray Japan," Takeshi said quietly. "I'm asking you to save Japan's future," Tanaka corrected. "These scientists can help rebuild after the war. Their knowledge could prevent future conflicts, but only if they survive. Only if someone skilled enough can get them out." Takeshi thought of Yuki, pregnant with their first child. He thought of dying in flames, his aircraft disintegrating against an American ship. He thought of living, knowing his family believed him dead. "If I refuse, you'll join the kamikaze units like everyone else. You'll die within months. Your child will grow up fatherless, and the scientists we're trying to save will likely be killed when their facilities are bombed." Tanaka pulled out a photograph, showing 3 middle-aged men in laboratory coats. "These are the people you'd be saving. Good men who want peace, who want their work to help humanity, not destroy it." Takeshi stared at the photograph, feeling the weight of an impossible choice. Kenji sat across from his father in the traditional family room, where his grandfather's medal still hung on the wall. Hiroshi Yamamoto, now 64, listened in silence, as Kenji explained the discovery of the Zero fighter, the intact condition, the coded journal. 300 miles from Leyte Gulf, Kenji concluded. "Father, the official story doesn't match the evidence. Grandfather didn't die the way we were told." Hiroshi's hands trembled slightly as he set down his teacup. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the framed photograph of Takeshi in his flight uniform. Finally he spoke. "Your grandmother never believed it either." Kenji leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "My mother, your grandmother Yuki. She accepted the medal, attended the ceremonies, raised me on stories of heroic sacrifice. But privately, she always had doubts." Hiroshi stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out an old wooden box. "She died in 1989. Before she passed, she gave me this and made me promise something." "What promise?" She said, "When the truth emerges, when someone finally asks the right questions, I should open it." Hiroshi's voice cracked slightly. "I've kept this sealed for 19 years, waiting without knowing what I was waiting for. Until now. He handed the box to Kenji. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age, addressed in Yuki's careful handwriting, to whoever seeks the truth about Takeshi Yamamoto. Kenji opened it with shaking hands. The letter was written in his grandmother's precise script. My husband was the finest pilot in the Imperial Navy. He flew 47 missions and never failed to return. When they told me he died crashing into an American ship, I knew something was wrong. Takeshi would not fail a simple attack. He was too skilled, too careful, too good at staying alive. 3 weeks before his final mission, a man named Tanaka visited our home. He spoke with Takeshi privately for hours. After he left, Takeshi was different, troubled. He held me that night and whispered that he might be gone for a very long time, but that everything he did was to protect our child's future. I didn't understand then. I spent 65 years not understanding. But Takeshi left me something, coordinates written in his hand on the back of our wedding photograph. He said if anything happened, if the official story ever felt wrong, these numbers might help someone find answers. Kenji turned the letter over. On the back, in faded ink, were navigation coordinates in Takeshi's handwriting. His hands went numb. Father, do you know what these coordinates are? No, I never checked. I didn't know how, and part of me was afraid of what I might find. Kenji pulled out his phone, entering the coordinates into a mapping application. The location appeared on screen, and he felt his breath catch. The coordinates matched exactly where they had found the Zero fighter off Okinawa's coast. Grandmother knew, Kenji whispered. Somehow, she knew where to look. She's been waiting 65 years for someone to find him. Hiroshi moved beside his son, looking at the phone screen. Tears streamed down his face. All my life, I thought I knew my father. I told you stories about his heroic sacrifice, but we never knew the truth, did we? No, Kenji said quietly. But grandmother suspected. And she left us a map to find him. The training facility in Formosa was hidden deep in the mountains, far from regular military bases. Takeshi arrived in April of 1943, one of only 7 pilots selected for Operation Kiku. The other 6 were like him, experienced flyers with perfect records and families they wanted to protect. Commander Tanaka gathered them in a windowless briefing room on their first day. Gentlemen, what you learn here will make you traitors in the eyes of many, but you'll be heroes to those who understand what's really happening. He projected photographs of 3 scientists onto the wall. Dr. Kenji Watanabe, radar technology. Dr. Hiroshi Sato, propulsion systems. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, communications encryption. These men have developed technology 10 years ahead of anything America or Germany possesses. They also understand that Japan cannot win this war. Takeshi studied the faces. The scientists looked tired, worried, like men carrying impossible burdens. These men want their research preserved, not destroyed in bombing raids or seized by occupying forces, Tanaka continued. They believe their work could prevent future wars if properly used. American intelligence has agreed to protect them and their families in exchange for their knowledge. Why do we need to be involved? One pilot asked. Why not just let them surrender? Because if they simply defect, they'll be labeled traitors. Their families in Japan will be arrested, possibly executed. The Kempeitai watches scientists closely. We need their disappearance to look like something else, something that raises no suspicion. Tanaka changed the projection, showing kamikaze attack formations. Special attack units are being formed across Japan. Suicide missions against American ships, U-7 will officially join these units. Your families will be told you're training for kamikaze operations, which is true in a sense. But instead of dying, we extract the scientists, Takeshi said slowly. Understanding the plan. Correct. You'll file flight plans for suicide attacks near specific American fleet positions, but you'll divert to designated coordinates, land near extraction points, load the scientists aboard modified aircraft, and transport them to Allied-controlled waters. Your death will be recorded officially. Your families receive full honors. The scientists disappear without suspicion. The training was brutal. 6 months of night navigation without instruments, emergency water landings, radio silence, protocols, identification of American ship signatures to avoid actual combat. They learned to fly their Zeros at wave-top level to avoid radar detection. They practiced controlled ditching in rough seas. Takeshi wrote letters home to Yuki, carefully worded to hide the truth. He told her about kamikaze training, about honorable sacrifice, about duty. Each word felt like a lie, but it was necessary to protect her. In September, Tanaka gave them their final briefing. American OSS has confirmed extraction protocols. Once you deliver the scientists, you'll be offered protection, new identities, relocation to America or neutral countries. You can never return to Japan. Your families must believe you're dead. That night, Takeshi wrote a final letter to Yuki, one he couldn't send. He included coordinates where someone might someday find answers. He wrote about love, about sacrifice, about choosing life over death to serve a greater purpose. Will our families ever know the truth? He asked Tanaka the next morning. Perhaps someday, when the war is distant history, and the truth won't endanger anyone, Tanaka replied. But not in your lifetime, Lieutenant. You're about to become a ghost. Dr. Margaret Chen from the U.S. Naval Historical Center arrived in Tokyo with boxes of declassified documents that had been buried in Washington archives for decades. She met Kenji at the National Archives, her expression suggesting she'd found something significant. Your grandfather wasn't alone, she said, spreading files across the research table. Operation Kiku was just the Japanese name. We called it the Chrysanthemum Network. Kenji scanned the documents, his English good enough to understand the implications. Official OSS reports from 1944 and 45 detailed cooperation with Japanese officers who wanted to preserve scientific knowledge and save lives as the war became obviously unwinnable. How many operations were there? Kenji asked. We've confirmed 12. Extraction missions between April 1944 and August 1945. 7 succeeded. The pilots delivered scientists to designated coordinates where American submarines picked them up. The scientists provided technology that shortened the war by months, possibly saving hundreds of thousands of lives on both sides. And the other 5 missions? Margaret's face darkened. The pilots never reached extraction points. 3 were confirmed lost at sea, mechanical failures, or navigation errors. 2 simply disappeared. Your grandfather was one of those 2. She pulled out a specific file marked Operation Kiku, Mission 7, October 1944. Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto was assigned to extract 3 scientists from a facility near Okinawa. His flight plan showed a fake kamikaze attack route near Leyte Gulf, but his actual destination was coordinates southeast of Okinawa, where a submarine would be waiting. The same coordinates where we found his plane, Kenji said. Exactly. But according to our records, the submarine waited for 3 days. Nobody showed up. The mission was recorded as failed, assumed lost. The scientists were evacuated through a different operation 2 weeks later. Kenji felt confusion rising. But if the submarine was waiting and my grandfather reached the coordinates, why didn't they meet? That's what we've been trying to understand. Margaret produced another document, this one marked classified until 2007, just a year ago. This is a declassified OSS report from their station chief in the Pacific. It mentions concerns about compromised operations, suspected intelligence leaks on the Japanese side. The report detailed suspicions that someone within Japanese naval intelligence was identifying and eliminating officers involved in extraction operations. Several pilots had died in circumstances that seemed suspicious, their deaths attributed to kamikaze attacks but occurring in locations that didn't match their supposed targets. You're saying someone was hunting these pilots, Kenji said slowly. Someone was cleaning up loose ends. The successful extractions happened early, before security was compromised. But by October 1944, when your grandfather flew his mission, the operation had been penetrated. We think someone was waiting for him, someone who wanted him dead rather than defected. Kenji thought about his grandfather's intact aircraft, the controlled water landing, the journal entries about Commander Tanaka. Do your records mention Tanaka? Commander Hideaki Tanaka? Margaret checked her files, then shook her head. No Tanaka in our liaison lists. Why? Because my grandfather's journal mentions Tanaka repeatedly. He was the one who recruited my grandfather, who ran Operation Kiku from the Japanese side. Then we need to find out who Tanaka really was, Margaret said. Because if he's not in our liaison records, he might have been working for someone else entirely. October 23, 1944. Takeshi sat in the final briefing room at the Formosa facility, listening to Commander Tanaka outline his mission parameters. 3 scientists waited at a research facility near Okinawa. Takeshi would file a flight plan for a kamikaze attack near Leyte Gulf, then divert southeast to extraction coordinates where an American submarine would be waiting. Questions? Tanaka asked. Takeshi had none. He'd trained for 6 months for this moment. His modified Zero carried extra fuel tanks and navigation equipment. His family believed he was about to die gloriously for the Emperor. Instead, he would disappear into a new life, having saved 3 men whose knowledge could help rebuild Japan after the war. After the briefing, Takeshi returned to his quarters to collect his personal effects. He found Lieutenant Kojima, another Operation Kiku pilot, waiting outside his door. Kojima looked terrified. "We need to talk," Kojima whispered. "Not here, follow." They walked to an abandoned maintenance hangar at the edge of the airfield. Kojima checked carefully to ensure they were alone before speaking. "Operation Kiku is a trap," he said bluntly. "Tanaka isn't naval intelligence, he's Kempeitai." Takeshi felt his blood turn cold. The Kempeitai were military police, notorious for rooting out disloyalty and dissent. "That's impossible. We've been training for 6 months. Training to identify ourselves as potential traitors," Kojima said. "Think about it. Every pilot in this program is someone who agreed to fake their death, to work with Americans, to abandon their families. We've all demonstrated willingness to betray Japan for what we think is a greater good. But the scientists? The technology? The scientists are real, they're also targets. Men who believe the war is lost, who want to preserve their work, instead of dying for the emperor. The Kempeitai wants them eliminated, but they can't just arrest them without revealing that dissent exists within the scientific community." Takeshi's mind raced through the implications. "So we fly our missions, collect the scientists, and then we're intercepted by Japanese patrol boats waiting at the extraction coordinates. They kill us, sink our planes, and it all looks like we died as kamikaze pilots. The scientists attempting to defect. Everyone's honor is preserved, and the Kempeitai eliminates potential traitors without scandal." "How do you know this?" Kojima pulled out a crumpled document from his jacket. "I found this in Tanaka's office last night. Internal Kempeitai communication. It lists all 7 of us by name, marked for elimination. The scientists too. Operation Kiku exists, but not for the reason we thought." Takeshi read the document, his hands shaking. Their names, their mission dates, their extraction coordinates, all marked with a single word in red ink. "Terminate." "What do we do?" he asked. "I'm not flying my mission," Kojima said. "I'm going to. I'm due my flying guest. To disappear tonight, try to reach Allied lines some other way. But Takeshi, your mission is tomorrow, you don't have time to run." Takeshi thought of Yuki, pregnant and waiting. He thought of the 3 scientists who believed they were being saved. He thought of the American submarine crew waiting at coordinates where Japanese patrol boats would be hunting instead. "The scientists don't know it's a trap," he said slowly. "No, Tanaka told them they're being rescued. They'll be waiting at the facility, trusting us to save them. Takeshi made his decision, then I'm going to save them. Just not the way Tanaka planned." The first threat arrived by email 3 days after Kenji published his preliminary findings about the Zero fighter discovery. "Anonymous sender. Untraceable routing. Stop digging into matters that dishonor the heroes of the Great East Asia War. Some truths are better left buried with the dead." Kenji deleted it and continued his research. The second threat was more direct. A phone call at 2 in the morning, a man's voice speaking careful Japanese. "Dr. Yamamoto, your grandfather died honorably. Don't turn him into a traitor. This is your only warning." By the end of the week, Kenji had received 17 threatening messages from what appeared to be Japanese nationalist groups. They didn't want the kamikaze mythology questioned, didn't want anyone suggesting that some pilots might have been involved in operations other than glorious suicide attacks. But the threats weren't only coming from Japan. Dr. Margaret Chen called from Washington looking worried. "Kenji, I've been told to stop cooperating with your investigation. My superiors say the Chrysanthemum Network files should remain classified for national security reasons." "The war ended 63 years ago," Kenji protested. "What national security concerns could possibly remain? They won't say. Just that some operations from that era still have sensitive implications. I've been ordered to return all materials to classified storage and cease communication with you." After Margaret hung up, Kenji sat in his office feeling the weight of pressure from both sides. Japan wanted the story buried to preserve national honor. America wanted it classified to protect old intelligence operations. Both governments seemed determined to prevent the truth from emerging. Then the families started contacting him. The first was Mrs. Nakamura from Hokkaido, 87 years old. Her brother had been a kamikaze pilot, officially killed near Okinawa in May 1945. But his plane was found 20 years ago near Taiwan, 300 miles from his supposed target, in perfect condition, like it had made a controlled landing. Then Mr. Yoshida from Osaka. His father, A highly skilled pilot with 60 combat missions, supposedly died in a kamikaze attack near Iwo Jima, but American records showed no Japanese aircraft activity in that area on that date. Within 2 weeks, Kenji had been contacted by 43 families, all with similar stories. Experienced pilots reported dead in kamikaze attacks, but with inconsistencies in locations, dates, or circumstances. Many had been found far from their supposed targets. Some had left behind journals or letters suggesting they'd been recruited for special missions. Professor Nakamura helped Kenji map the disappearances. They created a timeline showing that most occurred between April 1944 and August 1945, exactly matching the period when the Chrysanthemum network was active. "This wasn't just your grandfather," Nakamura said, studying the map. "This was systematic. Dozens of pilots involved in something that both governments still want hidden." Kenji's phone rang, his father Hiroshi, voice shaking. "Someone broke into the house. They didn't steal anything, just left a message on the table. It says your investigation is putting the family in danger. Father, go stay with Uncle Kenji. I'm calling the ENRI. Police." "No police," Hiroshi said firmly. "That's what the message said. No police, no media, or the truth about your grandfather will be buried permanently, along with anyone looking for it." Kenji realized he wasn't just investigating history anymore. He was threatening something that powerful people, in both Japan and America, still wanted protected 63 years after the war ended. October 25, 1944. Takeshi's Zero fighter climbed into the pre-dawn darkness, officially headed for a kamikaze attack near Leyte Gulf. But his mind worked through the impossible choices facing him as he flew southwest over the Pacific. Option 1 was simple: follow orders, complete the fake kamikaze attack, navigate to the extraction coordinates. But Kojima's warning echoed in his thoughts. Japanese patrol boats would be waiting, Kempeitai forces ready to eliminate him and the scientists. He would die, the scientists would die, and Tanaka's trap would close perfectly. Option 2 was nearly as bad: abort the mission, turn back, try to expose Tanaka. But the Kempeitai's reach was long. Yuki would be arrested for his treason. His unborn child would grow up shamed, the family of a traitor. And the 3 scientists would still die when Tanaka sent another pilot into the trap. Option 3 terrified him because it meant abandoning all plans, all safety, all certainty. But it was the only choice that gave everyone a chance at survival. Takeshi altered his course, flying low over the water to avoid radar detection. He headed southeast toward Okinawa, but not toward the official extraction coordinates. Instead, he navigated to a small research facility he'd memorized from intelligence briefings, a location where the scientists were supposedly waiting. He arrived just after dawn. The facility was isolated, built into coastal cliffs, with a small dock for supply boats. Takeshi circled once, saw no Japanese patrol activity, and made his decision. The landing was dangerous. He brought the Zero down on a stretch of beach barely long enough for the aircraft, rocks scraping the undercarriage as he fought to stop before hitting the cliff face. 3 men ran from the facility, confused, but recognizing the aircraft markings. Dr. Watanabe, Dr. Sato, Dr. Tanaka. The scientist Takeshi had been sent to extract. Commander Tanaka said, "You'd meet us at sea," Dr. Watanabe shouted over the engine noise. "Plans changed," Takeshi yelled back. "Get in now! We have maybe 10 minutes before patrol boats arrive." The scientists scrambled into the modified rear compartment Takeshi's Zero had been fitted with. It was cramped, barely enough room for 3 men, but it worked. Takeshi gunned the engine, racing down the beach for takeoff. The Zero struggled with the extra weight, barely clearing the water as it lifted into the air. Then he heard the machine gun fire. A Japanese patrol boat rounded the point, its deck gun opening up. Tanaka's forces, positioned not at the fake extraction site, but here at the real one. They'd known his actual plan somehow, or simply covered all possibilities. Bullets stitched across the Zero's fuselage. Takeshi felt the aircraft shudder as rounds punched through the thin aluminum skin. The engine began smoking, temperature gauges climbing into dangerous territory. "Hold on," he shouted to the scientists. He couldn't climb, couldn't gain altitude with the damaged engine and extra weight. His only option was to stay low, skim the waves, and hope the engine held together long enough to reach somewhere, anywhere away from Japanese-controlled waters. Behind him, Dr. Sato spoke quietly. "You're not taking us to the Americans, are you?" "I'm taking you anywhere that's not here," Takeshi replied, fighting the controls as the engine began failing. The extraction was a trap. "We're on our own now." The engine seized completely 30 miles from Okinawa. Takeshi had just enough control to execute a controlled ditching, landing. Gear partially extended, bringing the crippled Zero down onto the ocean surface as gently as physics allowed. The Philippine island of Mindoro was smaller than Kenji expected, a quiet fishing community where few tourists ventured. He found Robert Henderson in a modest house overlooking the bay, a 93-year-old American who still walked without assistance and spoke with sharp clarity. "I wondered when someone would finally come asking about the chrysanthemum pilots," Henderson said, gesturing for Kenji to sit on his porch. "Took 64 years. That's longer than I expected, honestly." "You knew my grandfather," Kenji said. "It wasn't a question." Lieutenant Takeshi Yamamoto. "Best damn pilot I ever worked with, Japanese or American." Henderson pulled out a faded photograph showing a younger version of himself standing beside Takeshi and 3 Japanese men in civilian clothes. That was taken in December 1944, about 6 weeks after he pulled off the impossible. "What happened?" Henderson settled into his chair, eyes distant with memory. "Your grandfather was supposed to extract 3 scientists and deliver them to coordinates where our submarine would be waiting. But someone on the Japanese side had compromised the operation. Takeshi figured it out and went rogue. He extracted the scientists himself, took damage from Japanese patrol boats, and ditched his aircraft about 30 miles from Okinawa. How did he survive?" Local fishermen found them the next morning, 4 men clinging to the wreckage. The fishermen were part of the resistance network, people who hated the military government. They got Takeshi and the scientists to a safe house, then contacted us through underground channels. We extracted them 2 weeks later using a supply submarine. Kenji felt his throat tighten. "So, he made it. He actually saved them. He saved more than them," Henderson said quietly. "Those 3 scientists, Dr. Watanabe, Dr. Sato, Dr. Retention. Tanaka, they'd developed radar improvements and propulsion technology that was years ahead of anything we had. The intelligence they provided helped us locate Japanese fleet movements, anticipate defensive positions, plan invasion routes more efficiently. Military analysts estimated their information shortened the war by at least 6 months. 6 months, Kenji whispered, understanding the implications. Hundreds of thousands of lives saved, perhaps millions, because his grandfather had chosen to go rogue rather than follow orders into a trap. "We offered Takeshi everything," Henderson continued. "New identity, American citizenship, relocation, money. He refused it all, said he couldn't live in America knowing his family in Japan believed he'd died honorably. If he resurfaced as a defector, they'd be shamed, persecuted, possibly arrested. So what did he do? He disappeared, stayed in the Philippines under an assumed name. We provided some financial support, helped him establish a quiet life here. He worked as a mechanic, fixed fishing boats, kept to himself. For 45 years, he lived maybe 200 miles from Japan but never went home." Henderson stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a worn journal. "He kept writing to your grandmother, you know, letters he never sent, hundreds of them over the decades. He gave them to me before he died, asked me to keep them safe until someone came looking for the truth." Kenji took the journal with shaking hands. Inside were letters addressed to Yuki, spanning from 1944 to 1989, the year she died. "He monitored Japanese newspapers, tracked his family from a distance," Henderson said. "He knew when his son was born, when you were born. He watched you all grow up through newspaper clippings and occasional reports from our intelligence network." "When did he die?" Henderson's expression grew sad. 1989. Same year as your grandmother. He heard about her death through our contacts. 3 days later. He was gone too. Some people say you can die of a broken heart. I believe it after watching Takeshi." Henderson led Kenji to a small workshop behind his house. Inside, covered with a tarp, sat parts of another Zero fighter, this one carefully maintained and preserved. "Your grandfather kept his original Zero hidden in a cave on this island for 45 years, Henderson explained, pulling back the tarp. "He'd salvaged it from where he ditched it, spent decades restoring it piece by piece, said someday he'd fly home, just once, to see Japan from the air again." "Why didn't he?" Kenji asked. "Because going home meant exposing the truth, and the truth would destroy his family's honor. As long as everyone believed he'd died gloriously in 1944, his wife and son were protected, respected, but if he returned, the Kamikaze records would surface. Documents showing he'd been recruited for a defection operation. He'd be labeled a traitor, and his family would suffer." Henderson pulled out a newspaper clipping from February 1989. "Your grandmother's obituary." Takeshi saw it 3 days after she died. He told me that with Yuki gone, nothing tied him to protecting the official story anymore. His son was grown, established. You were 16 years old. The shame couldn't hurt Yuki anymore. So he decided to fly home, Kenji said quietly. He took off on February 23, 1989, just before dawn. Told me he was going to fly over Tokyo, see his family's house one time, then ditch the plane somewhere it would eventually be found with evidence explaining everything. He'd hidden letters in the cockpit, his journal, photographs, all the proof needed to understand what really happened. Kenji thought about the sealed cockpit, the preserved documents, his grandfather's careful preparations. He planned to be found. 65 years seemed long enough to protect the secret, Henderson said. He thought by 1989, the truth wouldn't hurt anyone anymore. He was flying home not to land, but to finally tell the story. But the plane failed. The engine was 65 years old, restored by a man in his 70s, working with limited tools. It held together for maybe 200 miles before it seized. He managed to ditch it, but he was 71 years old, alone in the ocean. By the time fishing boats reached the area, there was nothing but the aircraft sinking slowly beneath the surface. Henderson's eyes were wet. He died trying to come home, Kenji. Died trying to tell you all the truth. 6 months later, Kenji stood in Tokyo as Japanese and American officials jointly announced the declassification of Operation Kiku documents. The press conference revealed the Chrysanthemum Network, the extraction operations, the technology that shortened the war. Takeshi's name was cleared of any dishonor, his actions recognized as heroism of a different kind. The Japanese government awarded him a posthumous medal for extraordinary service. The American government added his name to a memorial, honoring Allied intelligence assets who saved lives during the war. The 3 scientists he'd rescued, all deceased by 2008, were acknowledged as contributors to peace. Kenji's father Hiroshi, now 64, stood beside his son as they accepted the honors. Your grandmother knew, Hiroshi said quietly. She always knew he was too good a pilot to fail. She was waiting for him to come home for 45 years. He tried, Kenji replied, thinking of his grandfather's final flight. He died trying. They brought Takeshi's remains home from the Philippines, buried him beside Yuki in the family plot. After 65 years apart, they were finally together. And the truth, carefully hidden for so long, was finally free.